evening. But I guess if we didn't come out this winter on snowy, cold evenings, we wouldn't get out evenings much at all, would we? My name is Kevin Kimley, and I serve as the Rastetter Chair of Agricultural Entrepreneurship here at Iowa State University and Director of the Agricultural Entrepreneurship Initiative. Tonight, as I think about it, our lecture marks a bit of a celebration, at least from my perspective. A celebration of innovation and entrepreneurship in our industry, agriculture. Our industry, like any other, of course, is faced with challenges, even when times are good. I think every industry and every company, all of us who serve our industry have some challenges. And part of it can certainly be the things that we deal with on a year-to-year basis, like weather. Others might relate to agriculture's role in the larger economy, commodity price fluctuations, or whatever the case may be. Other challenges might be longer term in nature, and perhaps Governor Schaefer will touch on some of those things this evening, global population growth and some of the other issues that I think are challenges for us. But as we work at the Agricultural Entrepreneurship, we try to instill in students who participate in our courses and who participate in our programs or to come to events like we have here this evening, that every challenge is an opportunity. You know, every opportunity, an opportunity to solve a particular problem, whatever that may be, an opportunity to meet an unfilled need, an opportunity to improve the way that we produce or the way that we do, an opportunity to bring a new technology to market, or an opportunity to start a new company that'll change the world. And so I'd like to thank, in particular, Stacy Noe, our program coordinator, for helping us put this together and coordinate the visit of Governor Schaefer here, and for all the work that she's done helping us set up our courses and our programs, our internships, putting speakers in classes, our innovation contests, and all the different ways that we try to touch students here on campus. But, you know, one of the things that I think is really important that we ask for, as we've done with Governor Schaefer, is that we ask leaders and entrepreneurs and others for their time. And so we're so pleased when they'll offer that resource to us. You know, my guiding idea behind a lot of the things that we do with the Agricultural Entrepreneurship Initiative is that it's people that change people's lives. And so the magic moment for a lot of good things that happen here is when we get interaction of students like you all and folks that bring a tremendous perspective to us here on campus, like Governor Schaefer. Therefore, we're so happy that you've come here to be with us this evening. Well, to formally introduce Governor Schaefer and to welcome you on behalf of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, I'd like to ask Dr. Joe Coletti to come forward and offer his remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So I'm introducing Secretary Schaefer. I'm one of the Associate Deans in the College of Ag and Life Sciences, and it's with great pleasure that I welcome you and welcome Secretary Schaefer. His presentation is entitled Innovation of the Global Agriculture in the 21st Century, and this is really a fitting topic and very appropriate for us to be thinking about and talking and discussing about it right now. And it's really fitting for the College of Ag and Life Sciences because it's been part of our culture and our vision, the global agriculture vision, for some time. One of the things that I just want to say in introduction is that our students, through our global ag programs, our study abroad programs, will be analyzing soil in Ghana. They'll be exploring ag technology development in Brazil. They'll be working with the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization in Rome. They'll be teaching ag sciences to students and people in Uganda and many other things. More than 200 of our students are going to have an expansion of their educational experience by participation in study abroad programs this summer. And one of the things that Dean Wendy Winterstein has established for the college is that we want to have one half of our graduating seniors have at least one international experience before you all get out of here. We think that this is really important. It is about the future, and we're on the globe. It is our home, but it is an international adventure that we're all about. Another source of pride for the College of Ag and Life Sciences is our new Global Resource Systems major. This is the first in the nation type of major where a student picks out a language, they pick out a region and a study topic, and they follow that through in that Global Resource Systems major. It is one that a lot of students, we just started last fall, and a lot of students are flocking to it because they really are looking for a systemic approach to understanding the complexities that we face in feeding the world, in finding the fiber, the various food items, providing the biofuels, protecting the environment, and sustaining our economies worldwide. So this Global Resource Systems major is one that really builds on our experience and expertise for the College of Ag and Life Sciences. We have participation or connection with 40 different nations around the world over a 3-decade period, and we're continuing to expand that. One of the things that we're looking forward to, Secretary Schaefer, is that we want to know what your insights are with respect to the global agriculture. And this is particularly important because you've had a distinguished career in public service and in business. One of the things that I want to let you know, too, that Secretary Schaefer was the 29th leader of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. He ended his tenure January 2009. And in that position, he was very involved and pushing with international trade and trade of ag products. Secretary Schaefer comes to us tonight from North Dakota. He was born and raised in Bismarck. He graduated from the University of North Dakota with a bachelor's degree in business administration, and then he went on to earn a master's of business administration from the University of Denver. After earning his MBA, he held a series of management positions with his family's company named Gold Seal Company before becoming president in 1978. Under his leadership, this family company, the sales climbed to over $50 million, and he did that through acquisition and new product introduction. So he knows the business, he knows about ag, he knows about the business world of agriculture. Secretary Schaefer also served as governor of North Dakota for 2 terms, ending his service there at the state in the year 2000. And after leaving office, he co-founded Extend America, a venture capital backed company to provide wireless, voice, and high-speed data service to commercial and residential customers in 5 Midwestern states. So he knows his stuff, and we're looking forward to the words and your vision tonight for global agriculture. Welcome, Secretary Schaefer.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for the great introduction. Thank you all for being here on kind of a cold and chilly and windy night. I appreciate you making your way over here, and I hope to give a few comments and then really have an opportunity to interact, to find out what's on your minds, to field some questions and hear some comments that you may have as well. So save up for the hard questions. We'll look forward to that. But really, as was mentioned, I'm a former governor. I'm a former Secretary of Agriculture. Seems like I'm a former everything these days. Not too long ago, I was introduced as the former Ed Schaefer. Now, I'm not sure what that was all about, but I kind of thought it was better than how my mother likes to introduce me these days, which is the late Governor Ed Schaefer. I'm not sure she gets that concept, but I do appreciate being here live and well among you, and am looking forward to the evening for sure. I woke up this morning, and it was 8 below zero. And I thought, wow, that's kind of a rude awakening and not a very great introduction to my time here on campus. And as I walked around campus today and as I interact with some students and professors and things, often I heard the comment say, well, you're from North Dakota. You should be used to this. This should be easy for you. And I'd just like to note for the record that this morning it was 2 degrees warmer in Fargo, North Dakota than it was here. And I'm actually looking forward to getting home and warming up a bit But I do thank you for the warm reception tonight and for the opportunity to be with you. My assignment tonight was to talk about, note the word was, my assignment tonight was to talk about the innovation in global agriculture for the 21st century. And, you know, sometimes students veer off the assignments. Sometimes they don't quite get that exactly what you're supposed to be doing and go off. And so I'm switching a little bit on that talk. And rather than talk about the need or the kinds of innovation, the specifics of innovation, I want to talk about kind of the need for innovation in global agriculture over the 21st century. And we can get into some of the specific innovations and things if you would like to in our questions and comments period. But I really am hoping that we can talk and set up the scenario and why that innovation in the agriculture arena today is going to be so important for us. And like I said, I'm going to spend some time visiting about that, and then I really am looking forward to getting your questions and your comments about where we need to go with agriculture in the future. Since I'm in egg country here and looking at how influential agriculture is in Iowa, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here at Iowa State University, I have to tell you, I was really impressed with being on campus, with interacting with the students that I've had the chance to do so, and I see some familiar faces out here. Thanks for coming again today. But I thought since I was egg country, I might step back a few minutes and talk a little bit about the United States Department of Agriculture. As was mentioned, I had the chance to lead that department as secretary, and it was a thrill being there and finding out about how influential agriculture is in the United States of America. And since it's your tax dollars that drive that department, I thought I'd give you a little background on what agriculture means in our country and where it comes from, and how influential agriculture is today really in our economy and in our public policy. The department operating budget is $95 billion. That's the annual operating budget. It's the fourth largest government agency. And it really is an interesting agency because it's very widespread. There are 107,000 people on any given day that work for USDA. That goes up and down, but around that 107,000 people is the official count, and delivers $285 billion worth of programs to the people of the United States of America. That includes landowners, producers, and certainly people as we look at our nutrition programs. Interestingly enough, only 15% of the budget's in production agriculture. Now, it is the agriculture department, but 15% of the budget is in that production agriculture. And so, you know, we really have expanded the image and the direction of agriculture through the department quite rapidly. It is a department that delivers nutrition and nutrition supplement programs throughout the United States through the school lunch program and the food stamp program and the women's, infants, and children's nutrition programs. A big part of USDA is on that side of the occasion as well. The largest agency in the department of USDA is the U.S. Forest Service. It's well over half the budget and operates, obviously, the forest and the forest lands and the grasslands across the United States of America. There are 29 agencies that make up the Department of Agriculture, and really that's why it touches every person in the United States in some way every day. And those are your tax dollars that are putting those programs in place. When Abraham Lincoln founded the USDA in 1862, he called it the People's Department. He called it the People's Department is because it affects so many people's lives in so many ways. And really that's been an aspect of USDA ever since. I was thrilled to be in charge of an agency that is quite different from other departments in Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, many times I found when I had meetings and things, other cabinet secretaries or other people that we were dealing with would rather come over to USDA than have we come over to their offices. And that was because there's a different culture there. It's a different culture because people are hardworking, they care, they grew up on the land. They're kind of farm kids, you know, from all over the United States of America. They grew up in farms and ranches and rural communities around the United States, and they got into agriculture administration. And what that allowed them to do, beyond the performance capacity of people who work hard, get a good day's pay for a good day's work, who are able to desire to get the job done and to really perform, but they do it in a friendly, neighborly manner. And that's really what comes from the agriculture side of things, is that ability to interact with others in a way that gets the job done, but also develops a community of performance. And I was very pleased to find that out when I was in Washington, D.C. The department also is international in scope, as you can imagine. We have 2,800 offices at USDA, including 90 offices in 70 foreign countries. And our efforts abroad are important for us as we look to extend the capabilities of the United States agriculture system into the rest of the world. We provide 50% of the food aid in the world today. You do. You as citizens and as taxpayers contribute to 50% of the food aid in the world today. Now, we get beat up for that, for not doing enough often, but think about that. You know, we produce enough food in the United States of America to provide all of that to the people of the world. And while we have the safest and most abundant and the least expensive food supply in the United States of America, we also are productive beyond our needs and are sharing that. We feed 22 million school children in 14 different countries abroad, knowing that it's hard to learn if you're hungry. It's difficult if you have that pain in your stomach to concentrate on academics and how important those programs are. We feed 1 million people every day in Zimbabwe because they don't have enough to eat there. Interestingly enough, Zimbabwe was a net exporter of agriculture products just a few years ago. And through a despotic leadership there who has trashed the economy, who has been very difficult with business and production methods and things, that country has become dependent on us to keep their people fed. But we do that. We do that because United States agriculture really has that influence on the globe. We're helping to generate better farming methods. We're looking at improving infrastructure. Where emerging countries are being able to use our technology and our efforts to learn how to take care of themselves. And one of the policy shifts that's going on today is moving out of that direct food aid into infrastructure development. As we look at what's happening in the world and what's going on, we really need to improve the agriculture arena. And it's becoming more critical every day. 80 million people come into this world every year. It's more than 80 million. The net gain in the globe today is 80 million. That means we had 80 million new mouths to feed. And because of that, the United Nations, in looking at agriculture production, has said, you know, if we are going to feed those people as the world continues to grow, need to double agriculture production by the year 2050. That's a goal that we're not going to meet if we continue on the current trajectory of how we're doing production agriculture in the world today. The yields that we see are just plain not doing the job. The yields of our commodity crops are flat or going down in most places. We are seeing increased yields with grains in the United States and Brazil. If you look at just wheat, you can add Canada, some of the areas of the Ukraine. But other than that, yields of our commodity crops are going down, and they're going down for a lot of reasons. They're going down for weather issues, environmental change issues, development of land, and just quite simply, bad agriculture leadership in communities that is using up the land and not developing good production methods. So we have a trajectory of increased population and the inability to feed ourselves in the future. Today, we are producing enough food in the world to feed everybody on a sustenance basis. We produce about 1,850 calories per day per person in the world. Now, we all know that it isn't in the right places, and some societies eat more than others, and all those factors are at play. But today, the productive capacity of the land is enough to feed everybody and to keep them alive and fed. Unfortunately, again, those trends are changing. And it's not going to be too long before we're not going to be able to do that unless we change our ways. And change our ways we must. Last June, I was in Rome. I chaired a panel for the Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO, which is a part of the United Nations. And the effort in the panel was to say, how can we sustain agriculture, and sustain agriculture especially in the emerging and developing countries? It was really interesting to see because time after time after time, agriculture leaders in countries around the world, and especially in the African countries, came up to the mic and said, we kind of missed the Green Revolution when we had hybrid opportunities and agriculture increased. We missed it because we just couldn't participate. We didn't have the infrastructure and abilities to do so. We didn't have the farm-to-market roads. We didn't have consistent electricity. We didn't have refrigeration for storage. We didn't have the credit to put farmer operations in place. We didn't have the marketing capacity to deal with our products with the global activity and the prices. And we certainly didn't have the money to buy seed. We didn't have extension opportunities to learn how to do better. And we kind of missed this whole green revolution. And country after country stepped up to the mic and said, don't let us miss it again, because we have growing needs and the inability for us to produce it. So the United States, again, taking the lead, is exporting our innovation, exporting our technology, exporting our methods, so that instead of food in the future, people that we export, we are exporting that technology so people can take care of themselves. We're working on good farming methods to increase yields across the world, looking at fertilizer regimes and water system management. We're looking at public policy that helps develop credit and opportunities to fund and advance agriculture. We're looking at land ownership issues and trying to work with governments on increasing that capacity to be able to deliver the food needs and the nutrition needs for the people of the world in the future. And it's really important that we be able to move forward in that arena because, as I said, and I'll say it again, we're not running down the path, we're not on a way that we are going to produce enough food and nutrition for the people of the world if we don't figure out ways to increase yields in country after country after country across this planet. And that gives us the challenge. That really gives the challenge and a crisis that we're facing in the future. I have a thing hanging on my wall. I've always carried it in wherever, my private sector or public sector, carried it with me. It is a character in Chinese. And it's up on my wall. The same character in Chinese is used for crisis and for opportunity. And that's really where we are today as we look at the food crisis in the world that's coming upon us. It's providing opportunity for people to get involved in the agriculture arena. And how important that is. We know that the lack of food and people being hungry causes food riots. It causes instability in governments, famine, a lot of difficulties out there. I have to tell you an interesting story. When I started talking about this at USDA, I was out in the circuit. I was giving some public comments, and I got a call from the State Department. And the State Department said, by the way, we don't say famine out there. It's not a thing. Evidently, it's some term that has some certain requirements to use. And I said, okay, I can't say famine, but I can say they have food riots because they don't have enough to eat. Yeah, that's okay. You can say that. Or I can say people are hungry, or they're not producing enough food. Yeah, you can say all those things. You just can't say famine. So that's all kind of fun. As another, that's just reminding me as another aside. I was talking about public policy one time and how it's developed. I was down in Florida speaking at a biofuels conference, and somebody asked me why government policy and why Congress wouldn't allow certain investments in an energy arena. And I thought for a minute, and I said, because they're nuts, because they just don't get what public policy needs and what we need to pursue for investment and things in our country. By the time I got back to Washington from Florida, I had a call from the White House and said, we're not used to our cabinet secretaries talking like that. You probably shouldn't call Congress nuts when they're in the middle of creating a farm bill and things like that. But, in a lot of cases, they are nuts. So, anyway, that's just a little aside. But some of the language that's used is not important. What's important is we have to figure out ways to invest in agriculture infrastructure so that we produce enough food for people to eat. And I think that is one of the most important focuses that we all can make. And you're going to be a part of it. You're going to be there. How are we going to increase those yields? There are problems in yields all across the world. There's a wheat rust problem called UG88. UG88 is causing bad yields, is causing big problems with wheat all across northern Africa and into southern Europe. Hasn't hit the United States yet, but there's no way we control it. We can't control it. There's not a method that we can put in place today, fast, that is affected with that disease. And we need to, maybe one of you here is going to figure out how to solve that problem. As we push our land-grant universities into research, into efforts to increase yields and deal with diseases, that's going to be so important for us. We really need to come up with those innovative new ways to be able to deliver agriculture. What's going to increase our yields again? Water management, environmental issues. How can we do that? You are going to provide some of the answers as we move forward on the global stage with the innovation of how we are going to increase those yields and feed people. But it's that agriculture, I think, that is what's so important today as we move forward. Agriculture really gives us the opportunity to take our crops and our livestock and our land use and really put it to good works. We keep people fed and clothed and fueled by the agriculture that we do. But importantly, it also produces the things that are the foundation of the United States of America. Agriculture produces that good, solid, neighborly delivery. It helps us produce justice and good character and ethics that are so important and part of our society. It really is the ability for us to see good days ahead, because agriculture is rising to the forefront as the most important issue on the world stage today. To kind of complete that thought, I thought I'd step back to Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States. Theodore Roosevelt was a sickly child. He grew up in New York City. He was the son of elite parents and a wealthy family. Kind of had it made, but had a tough life. He was asthmatic. His health wasn't good. He didn't ever really have a chance to develop as his physical capacities. And, he worked hard. He went to Harvard. He was very smart. And one day, February 14th, actually, Valentine's Day, both his wife and his mother died on the same day. In his sorrow, he took off and ended up in North Dakota. That's where he went to seek solace and to figure out what he wanted to do with his life. And it was there on the land of North Dakota that he healed his soul, that he regained his health. When he got involved in ranching, he owned three ranches in North Dakota. He was in the saddle all day long. He worked side by side. He learned the necessity of hand-in-hand help of your neighbor and of that frontier justice and the effort to build a community around agriculture. And as he became strong and important, as he contemplated the United States of America and our direction and things, he did become president. And he said often, it had not been for my life living and working in North Dakota, I never would have been president of the United States. And it was that strength of the land that took this sickly, downtrodden, soul-injured person and helped build him into what became the 26th president of the United States. And that really is what I call the language of agriculture and how important that is. And I'd like to give you a few more examples of how that language of agriculture works. I think the first example that I'd like to give you is agriculture is the language of compassion. As I mentioned already, we in the United States, through our agriculture efforts, contribute 50% of the global food aid today. We also are really learning how to care for one another through developing infrastructure and opportunities for jobs and careers in agriculture all across the world. And that's important, and that shows that agriculture is involved in the friendliness and the help of a neighbor and the compassion that we need so much out there in the world today. I was recently in Colombia. I met with a farmer who had 18 kids. He kind of, it was pretty interesting. He did have 18 children. He had two successive families, so that kind of makes a little difference. But, he was talking about the fact that in Colombia, he had been displaced from his land. He was kicked off his own land by the drug lords. And he was really, literally foraging in the jungle to keep his family alive. And through a good president, a good leader, when President Uribe came to power in Colombia, they changed the face of that. They got involved with the judiciary, with the military, with public policy, and they changed the face of agriculture by booting out the drug barons and allowing people to get back on their own land. And in visiting with this farmer, he was talking about how he's back on his own land now, and a bunch of farmers got together with an association or a cooperative that we'd call it here, and they figured out that they could plant African date palms and make oil out of that crop. They did so. And they started putting the palm trees in place. The former Secretary of Agriculture in Colombia came in with some money and built an oil processing plant for the product, gave 50% of it to the farmers that were supplying the product to the factory, and they started making edible oils and fuel oils from these African date palms. Interestingly enough, this farmer said he's back on his land, he's performing now, he's paid off all his debts, he's bought some more land, but he said the most important thing is I have 3 kids in college in the United States of America. And he said that is what agriculture is all about. It's about education and preparing for the future and the opportunities that we provide for people through education and how important that is. The World Food Prize is something that's given to somebody who's had huge impact on agriculture globally every year. Matter of fact, that prize is, I think it's about due. But anyway, it's someone that has a lot of focus on agriculture. The World Food Prize in 2008 was given to Senators McGovern and Dole, a Republican and a Democrat. And they together as a team formed the McGovern-Dole food aid programs. Those programs not only feed the people of the world, but they also started working on revamping the opportunities in the United States of America. The nutrition and the school lunch programs. They did work together to change the food stamp delivery. They made nutrition available to people who couldn't afford it. And their efforts were to provide that agriculture energy throughout the world. The United States first, but throughout the world. As I mentioned, 22 million kids are fed through that program so that they are not hungry. They're learning to be better citizens and better productive members of the society. But when that award was presented, it was in the chambers in Nebraska. The chambers, as you all know, have aisles, and the Republicans sit on one side and the Democrats sit on the other. And what was interesting is when these two kind of now old war horses received the World Food Prize, when they came off the podium, they sat down one on each side of the aisle. And they reached across and held hands. And that is what agriculture is all about. It's hard work, it's compassion, it's bipartisan effort, and it's friendship that gets things done in the world. And that moment of seeing those two people share this prize for what they've done for agriculture was really a special time, and I was really proud to be there. But that language of agriculture continued to crop up. I'm reminded of, when I speak about language of agriculture, is I was in a fourth grade class in California. We were in the middle of fruit country there, and I was talking to the students in a biology class, and one of the little guy raised his hand and he said, "Hey, is it true that if you find two strawberries that are kind of grown together, if you give them to your girlfriend, that she'll fall in love with you?" I said, "Yes, absolutely, for sure." I thought, this kid's got it made. He's going to be a real romantic guy. But I figured, okay, so the language of agriculture is love. It really is that sharing between people and the love and admiration that we do develop among one another. The last example that I want to give you is an important one. The United States Department of Agriculture operates recovery programs in Iraq and Afghanistan. You have one country that was a despotic leader that allowed a good developed agriculture system to just disappear and to crumble, and there's nothing there today. You had another in Afghanistan that really was never developed. It's a desert country. The agriculture there was never a big deal. Again, drugs rule the day, and poppy seeds are grown. And USDA is there on the ground with provisional reconstruction teams that are teaching people how to get back to agriculture in one hand or enhance agriculture in the other. And they're among the people there. They're building programs. They're looking at water systems. They're helping build storage facilities. They're putting together cooperatives so that farmers can market their products. They're interacting with the government to develop policy that enhances agriculture. I had a chance to talk to our USDA folks in those two countries once in a while via interactive video. And we'd just get together and see what they were talking about and what they're up to. And I would ask them over the internet, basically, over our video, how things were going. And they talk about the projects that they were helping to deliver in the communities. They were good. They were doing well. But I'd say, well, what about your interaction with people? What about the way that you deliver in people? What's happening there? And they talked about going in the homes of the people that they worked with. They talked about working in the fields and then being invited to the dinner table. And they were interacting with those families, and they were sharing the happiness and the joys and the sadnesses of the families that they were working with. They were invited to weddings and funerals, but they were at the dinner table, friendliness with the people that are there. And I'm firmly convinced that that is the language of peace. When we bring people together through agriculture, we are advancing peace in the world, and agriculture is on the forefront of that. So that's the language of agriculture, and it's why, as we look at meeting the needs of the global problems that we have tomorrow in feeding and providing enough nutrition for the people of our country, it is really agriculture and the innovations and the directions and the policies that we have developed here that we can export across the world that's going to make a difference in people's lives. And I'm convinced that you are all going to be a part of that. I really have had a fun time here today and getting to know some of you, but mostly kind of absorbing what's going on in agriculture. And it gives me a good confidence in our future, knowing that you're there, that you're committed, that you're interested, and that you are going to be a part of solving some of these issues as we move forward in the global agriculture arena today. So thank you for all that. Thank you for being a part of it. And now I'm glad to answer any questions or comments that you might have. If I know you have to go and have other things going, please feel free to jump up and walk out or do whatever you'd like to do, because, hey, I'm a former governor. I'm used to talking to the legislature, so just, you don't have to pay attention. Thank you. I think Joe's going to moderate. And
There is a microphone that's off to the back here. If you want to step up there and ask your question, or if you have a proven enough voice to stand and project where you are, you have the floor to ask questions.
well, thank you very much. I'm out of here. Don't be bashful. I'm glad to lend any of my experiences or background to things. And, you know, if you want to talk about agriculture policy or politics or private business or investment or innovation or entrepreneurialism, just jump up and have at it. Oh, I thought we had a question over there. She was just putting on her coat. Dang it. Yes, sir. So much for the mic, huh?
My question is in reference to the African American farmers that had filed a lawsuit against USDA a couple of years ago. Was that issue ever resolved?
The lawsuit against the inequities of delivering farm programs to black farmers has been a very difficult issue, and it has not been resolved. We have spent approximately $1.5 billion in reparations and trying to come to agreement on that. The difficulty right now are these technical legal questions about, did you file the lawsuit in time? It's a class action. Was your proven injury, within the confines of what the class action takes place? And there are many farmers out there who are aggrieved and probably were treated unfairly, but because of legal ramifications back and forth are not being dealt with properly and not being settled with. Last year in the new Farm Bill, there was $100 million that was put in to investigate cases, to bring this to the forefront and try to come to a conclusion about direction. President Obama has said we will solve this problem and we will come to an agreement and a conclusion on the lawsuits that are taking place by black farmers. But today I can't tell you that it's resolved, but it is moving in the right direction. Importantly, because of that lawsuit, the United States Department of Agriculture has changed the way it delivers programs. And it's become more fair, more open, more transparent, and delivered on the basis of need and production values, not on the basis of color or creed or things like that. There were some issues there in the past. I think they've been corrected in delivery. But the people who really were harmed and damaged and aggrieved here have not come to a successful conclusion in their efforts against the United States government.
Yeah, hi. Hey, I'm an old-time grad of Iowa State. I used to be in the cattle business a long time ago. We used to buy some feeder cattle out of North Dakota, South Dakota, ship them into Iowa. And when I grew up, everybody raised cattle, corn, hogs, and beans, and we fed a lot of corn into cattle, back in the 60s and 70s. Well, today there's a lot of, there's books out there and criticism about particularly feeding grain to livestock and so forth. You got Michael Powell on the Omnivore's Dilemma and McWilliams down in Texas. And a lot of people are critical of the USDA and policy towards subsidizing grain farmers, particularly corn, because corn's not good for the environment, and then you feed it into livestock, and the methane and the gas causes global warming, all these types of issues. And some of them sound somewhat legitimate. Could you address some of those issues that are out there and some of the criticisms of particularly feeding livestock, particularly cattle, because that's a big part of the agriculture here in Iowa?
Sure. I'm not sure where to start, on that broad question, but let me try here to give you some sense as to what's going on out there. The environmental influence these days on production agriculture is starting to become a stronger piece of what we're dealing with, and especially on a public policy basis. Because there are certain groups and organizations that are pushing changes and things in environmental efforts, really, in my opinion, a lot of ways are invented to say production agriculture is a problem. If you want to look at the grain situation and the ability to build protein through raising cattle, it's an important part of our protein raising capacity. I'll give you an example today in China. They are pork and poultry folks in China. They don't do beef over there. The only beef raised is for dairy, and the spent dairy cows go into the meat production cycle. But the government said, we're vulnerable to protein. If we have avian flu or something like that, we have to destroy the flocks of birds, and we're just totally dependent on pork. We can't feed our people, and we need to increase the capacity of beef generation in this country so that we can do protein. So while, sure, that takes grain, it's important to note that with yield increases that we've seen in corn specifically, we're able to increase the yields, the production of corn, and if the continuation of that goes, we are at in the last 15 years, I think I said 10 this morning, but it's the last 15 years, we've gone from an average of 75 bushels an acre to 150 bushels an acre average yield for corn in the United States today. We have many farms that are producing 300 bushels an acre today, and we are moving toward that effort. We will see soon the average of 300 bushels an acre in corn across our country. When that happens, that yield increase takes care of the increased feed requirements for raising beef. It takes increased exports to feed animals in other countries of the world and people in other countries of the world, and it increases our ability to use corn as a feedstock for ethanol and other fuels. So that yield is really the answer to the problem here, because we're not taking food out of the people's mouths. We're not taking food away from our trade efforts or whatever. We are picking up the capacity of corn yields to do our beef production, our animal production, our bird production, and as well as our fuel and fiber production across the United States. So I think while there are efforts here, especially in corn, to say, gee, it's a bad thing if you use corn for this, if you use corn for that, or you use corn for this, those aren't good things for our environment or for our system or for our economics. The reality is we are proving that through our yield increases we can handle all those things, and it does not become a problem. There's a big relationship and a concern about food and fuel and feed. And a lot of people are saying, gee, if we get into corn production, we don't want to pull all that off and make fuel and then see the cost of food go up. And there was a big hassle about that in the United States in 2008. As global prices increased, a lot of people put the blame on biofuels. And really, if you looked at what happened in the world in 2008, we saw a 43% increase in inflation for the cost of food. Very difficult time. Now, it was about 10% in the United States because we don't use our commodities directly. We have packaged foods and processed foods, and you all like to eat out in McDonald's and things like that. By the way, USDA feeds more people in the United States of America every day than McDonald's and Burger King combined. Just a little side note there. But you know, as you start investigating those increased costs on a global basis, of the 43%, 18% of it came from the cost of energy. Because the cost of energy increased as oil went up, as we were looking at $150 and $170 a barrel oil, that translated into the cost of food because, you know, not only do you have increased fuel costs for your tractors and your distribution methods, but we get a lot of petrochemicals and a lot of packaging materials from oil-based products, and transportation is just so expensive that you can't afford it. One example I used this morning in a class was we at USDA at a time had some grain in storage, and we sold it to be able to buy commodities for some other countries that we felt needed some commodity crops. We sold $200 million worth of wheat. And we then went out and bought commodities, other commodities that were needed in some needy countries. In doing so, only $90 million of that got in the street. $110 million was used up in transportation to get those products where they needed to be. That's the impact that the energy thing has on the cost of food. Another 18% of it was based on weather patterns. We had crummy weather in Australia, in the Balkan communities of Europe. Yields were down. When availability goes down, supplies go down, guess what? Prices go up. That's a big part of the equation. So you had energy hit, you had the production methods hit because of weather. A third issue is the emerging middle classes in the BRIC countries. The BRIC is Brazil, Russia. What is BRIC? Brazil, Russia, China, and India, or India and China. And the BRIC countries, you know, the middle classes are emerging. People are making more money. They're changing their eating habits. They're moving out of the raw commodities into other value-added and processed foods. And that had a big impact on the cost of food. And in the end, in that equation, about 10% of the food cost inflation in the world on that 43%, about 10% of that was because of increased usage of corn for fuel. I'm rambling around in your question, and I apologize for that. Let me give you one other statistic here that's important as we look at the generation of fuel. And that is what really we as a society don't quite understand yet, is that there is a cap on our fuel generated from corn at 15 billion gallons. Now, the renewable fuel standards in the United States of America today say that we want to build 32 billion gallons of fuel, biofuels, by the year 2020. In 2008, we produced about 9 billion gallons. In 2009, we produced about 10 or 10.5 billion gallons. And we have experts here in the audience that will probably give you better stats than I and more accurate stats. But, you know, we're on the way of capping off the blender's credits for 15 billion gallons built from corn. And the reason that is because the public policy in the United States of America says we're going to push our efforts into the second generation biofuels, or the cellulosic efforts that allow us to produce ethanol and fuels, other fuels, not based on food feedstocks, but based on things that carry cellulose, like grasses, switchgrass and alfalfa, like corn stalks instead of the corn on the cobs, the new growth trees and wood chips and things like that you can develop the energy out of. And so we're going to fill the gap with second generation biofuels that will take the pressure off any impact that the use of corn has for the increased costs for your food in the supermarket every day. So I think, you know, as you look at that whole grain process, again, the answer, what I started out with in my comments, is if we're going to meet the global demand for nutrition, we have to increase the yields of our commodity products across this world. Increasing yields solves the problem of feeding your grain to the cattle and the hogs and the poultry systems. Increasing yields allows you to build biofuels that create energy independence, jobs and careers in rural America, and better for the environment and things like that. Increased yields are going to allow us to deliver agriculture in the future that will solve some of these societal tugs of war that are telling us we should do that or can't do that or that's not a good idea, because coming together, building a good food supply is what we all need to do, and it's going to balance out.
Hi.
So that got everybody going.
So I was wondering if you had ever talked within the USDA about subsidies for produce. The reason being that it could
Was
be...
it Anastasia?
Yeah.
I can't quite hear you, Anastasia.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was wondering if anyone within the USDA or with the Farm Bill had been talking about subsidies for produce. The reason being that with subsidies for grain, it could be argued that you're encouraging farmers to switch to grain and lowering prices of commodity crops, but keeping prices high for produce, which is something that all Americans arguably should be eating more of. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yes, the new Farm Bill contained a big section on what we defined as specialty crops. Specialty crops are the vegetables and fruits and things, and for the first time moved those crops into available subsidies based on base yields and things in areas that you never could do that before. Also, it allowed you to adjust your basis of where you are growing grains and things like that by putting fruits and vegetables in there. You didn't lose your basis on the grain on the land long term. So there were some adjustments in the Farm Bill to try to enhance the supply side of fruits and vegetables in the country. The next piece of the new Farm Bill in that effort was to advance beyond the supply side and say, how can we work on the demand side? And in that, we revamped the food stamp program, the school lunch program to be more healthy, to be more helpful, to look in ways that we can serve more vegetables and fruits in meals. As we change that around, I had the chance to go around and have a lot of school lunches with kids and work with them in saying we're going to change the balance of your meals to be more healthy and better for you as you go forward. So on the supply side, or the demand side, the programs are moving into fruits and vegetables. And on the demand side, we're saying, how can we change those nutrition programs to be better balanced, better for people, and move then again those fruits and vegetables into the menus and the things that are there. There's also a lot of work being done on the value of nutritional supplements with vegetables and fruits. So the United States Department of Agriculture operates what I call a village. It's at Tufts University in Boston. It's a place where people come and live, and they live in here. It's got entertainment complex. It's apartments. You live there, and your food intake is all measured. What you do, your exercise is measured. Everything is measured. So you live in this kind of cocoon. And that's an effort to say, what are the nutritional needs of people in the United States of America today? And as we battle the obesity problem, as we battle the efforts of healthier foods for our diets, it's those research and initiatives that are taking place that are allowing us to say, you really need this as part of your diet. These are important ways that we get our vitamins and minerals and things that we do with fruits and vegetables across the country. On a global basis, there's a lot of attention being put on fruits and vegetables, and especially vegetables. I was recently in Taiwan, and I was at the International Vegetable Research Center, which is outside of Taipei. And interestingly enough, they're seeing that as we see emerging countries and developing countries, one of the ways that you can get people involved in agriculture are vegetable gardens. Vegetables, you can grow a high-value crop in a small piece of land. You can tend the garden out in the backyard. You can provide not only food for your family, and nutrition from your family, but you can create enough to sell in your neighborhoods and your communities. So that whole effort to say, how can we create value out of agriculture through vegetables is becoming a very important part of the development of agriculture in emerging countries as well. So a lot of stuff going on in fruits and vegetables. We got away from it for too long. The system's starting to correct itself to bring that back into much more balance. Yes? The largest obstacle in supporting innovation to the rest of the world. I'd have to say that the biggest obstacle in innovation is political leadership. I think that if you look at emerging and developing countries, and you look at the leadership there, you have to realize that the support of innovation changes dramatically by what you're allowed or not allowed to do. Many countries during the food crisis of 2008, the tail end of 2007, 2008, and the beginning of 2009, many countries installed public policy methods that said, we're going to save our domestic supply of food, we're going to cut off exports, we're going to contain our food at home, we're not going to allow our production to move where the marketplace is. And in doing so, they choked off innovation and investment in their own countries. When they said, we can't operate in the marketplace, people said, why would I invest there? What am I going to do? How am I going to advance my business or my farm or my ranch? I can't do that if the government is constricting the marketplace where I'm allowed to operate. And we saw country after country in trying to create a domestic supply really ruin the opportunity long term because of that public policy that choked off investment. The key to innovation, of course, is investment and return on that investment, and public policy has to support that. I'll give you two different examples. In China, China has an emerging private sector. Since the year 2000, when China was granted most favored nation status by the United States of America, a permanent most favored nation status, and since they entered the WTO a year later, the World Trade Organization a year later, they have said, we need, if we're going to deal with our expanding population, if we're going to create jobs and opportunities, we need to allow that private sector to flourish. And what they did was they said, we're not sure how to do that. We're not sure what public policy to put in place. We don't really want to put chokeholds in by what we do. So they said, we're just going to let that business class emerge. We're just going to let it go forward, let the companies put in place. They put in legal systems that would support the formation of capital and the formation of business. And then they just let it be. And they said, we'll let it percolate, and then we're going to follow it with public policy. Then when we see what works and we see what encourages investment, we'll follow that with public policy. That produced a tremendous amount of innovation in China over the last several years. It's been amazing to see. Now contrast that with an example we had this morning visiting with some faculty members about Argentina. Now Argentina said, by the way, we want to keep our grains and products at home. We don't want them shipped out. We're going to wrap a ribbon around our country and not allow that to happen. Now when people were constricted from selling their products, they didn't export their products anymore. They didn't make investments in their operations anymore. What they did was they exported their expertise, and they bought farms in Bolivia and Uruguay and neighboring countries and said, we'll just operate them over there because those are open for investment and open for innovation. And so instead of the resulting efforts of the Argentinian public policy was to really go in the wrong direction from what they were trying to do. They were trying to provide that internal market for their producers, and what they did was they choked off investment, and the opportunities went to surrounding countries. And those are two examples of the way public policy can affect innovation and investment in countries. And so, there are tons of barriers to innovation, as you all are learning about, but really probably the single most identifiable barrier to innovation is really government public policy. Y'all are taking it easy on me.
Yeah, I do. Hopefully this will be a quick one. So you've spoken today about cellulosic biofuels and switching away from food crops. But one thing I've always wondered, and I've never really gotten an answer on, is if you're switching to other crops like switchgrass and things like that, aren't you just taking land? I mean, there isn't enough marginal land to produce all the biofuels. So you're still taking away from food in the end.
Mm-hmm. I would contend really that there is enough land and marginal land to look at second growths through the season, to look at cover crops where you haven't had them before, and importantly to look at other things that we don't really conceive as being part of the agriculture arena. And the example that I would give you is wood, waste wood, wood chips, wood products, and things like that. There's a company, the first commercialized cellulosic ethanol plant in the United States of America is in Soperton, Georgia. It's a 150 million gallon facility, and it's the first one that's been able to move out of the lab and trying to get to a commercialized production. They build fuel out of wood chips. It remains to be seen whether it's going to be a successful commercialized project or not. It was an 18-month build. We funded it at 6 o'clock at night on my last day at USDA to get it going. The new Farm Bill provided some dollars in there to advance cellulosic ethanol and some loan guarantee bases. And I was hoping from June, the end of June, when we received the new Farm Bill at USDA, to the delivery of that, develop the rules and the regs and get them all published and put in place, that we'd be able to do the first one, and we did, barely. But importantly, if you look at just wood, they put it in Soperton, Georgia, because it's in furniture-making country, and you've got a lot of wood chips and things. But if you look just at wood, waste wood, clean forest initiatives, lumber mill cast-offs, the ability to collect just the wood that's available in the United States of America today. We use in the United States 150 billion gallons of gasoline annually. There's enough waste wood, new growth trees, and products to create cellulosic fuels from wood and wood waste products to create 160 billion gallons of gasoline. And that's but one product in the cellulosic mix. So if you look at just wood alone, you can do it. If you look at the grasses, the opportunities for those second growth situations with farmers and land use, and if you look at the ways that we can grow grass in marginal land and cover crops and CRP. I got in trouble in Washington one time because I suggested that maybe we should use CRP land, to grow feedstocks. The wildlife folks didn't like that much, and the people that said, well, you're subsidizing nothing out there, and why, if we're already paying them for CRP land, would we buy their products to use for fuel? And there was a lot of arguments about that. I thought it was a good idea, actually. But really, there are opportunities out there, and we don't have to take away the productive value of the land we have today to be able to increase the need for our biofuels and our renewable fuels in the future. Well, thank you. Thank you.